Hello, everyone, and welcome to BYLC's Global Youth Climate Summit 2021. My name is Rashi Shameen, and I welcome you once again to our plenary, which will be on View from the Frontlines of Bangladeshi Experience. This plenary is a little different from all of the rest because we will be focusing more on the Bangladesh highlight, as you will know more from our panelists and our moderator. Before I begin, I would like to briefly tell you a little bit more about our session today. Today's session will highlight a survey we did in association for BYLC with the Center for Urban Studies, which will be focusing on what the youth's perception of climate change and its impact is. To present these findings, we have with us today Taiba Hosne Ishra, who is the Deputy Manager for the R&E team, which is Research, Monitoring, and Evaluation at BYLC. Taiba has done her Bachelor of Business Administration as well as her Master's of Business Administration from North-South University. To moderate this session, may I please welcome Sohara Meroz Shoshi. Sohara Meroz Shoshi is a Bangladeshi freelance environmental journalist and development professional working as the head of solutions mapping at UNDP. A graduate of Yale University, Sohara is currently pursuing a master's in environmental change management at the University of Oxford. With UNDP, she has worked on designing a project on enhancing women's adaptive capacity to climate change in coastal areas and on tracking the climate expenditure of 20 ministries and developing Bangladesh's first ever national climate budget report in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance. Sohara has also covered various international conferences, including World Economic Forum Davos in 2017, the United Nations General Assembly 2018, and the International Climate Conference COP in 2015, 2016, and 2019. She also leads a volunteer youth organization named Global Shapers Community, through which she initiated a city greening initiative named Trillionaire that has been replicated in 4 countries. For her work on climate change, she was elected as an Asia Foundation Development Fellow in 2019, an Acumen Fellow, and an Atlantic Council Millennium Fellow in 2020. She is the first Bangladeshi winner of SCE's Asian Young Environmental Journalist of the Year Award. It is my great pleasure and honor to welcome Sohara today as our moderator for the plenary and to take it forward with all we have planned for you delegates. Sohara, I would now like to invite you on this virtual stage. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Roshni, and welcome everyone to this session, which is extremely timely. As you know, Bangladesh is one of the most climate vulnerable nations in the world, and youth of today, while they're not responsible for climate change, will be the ones shouldering the burden of it going ahead. So it's extremely important that they're not only aware of climate change, but are also empowered with the tools they need to take action to combat it going ahead. And it's indeed timely that at this time, BYLC has done a study to capture the pulse of the youth around the nation, all around Bangladesh, in terms of what they are thinking about climate change and what support they think they need to take steps to combat it. We will have a presentation to discuss the findings of this study, and we are also extremely delighted to have an amazing panel of speakers who will be joining us in this session today. And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce them to you one by one. Firstly, we have Dr. Nurul Nazim Choudhury, who is the professor and chairman of the Department of Geography and Environment, Faculty of Earth and Environmental Sciences of the University of Dhaka. He's an urban geographer and planner and holds a PhD from the University of Durham, UK. He has published 42 reviewed papers in journals, along with monographs and papers in national and international books. And he's a leading player in the faculty's research and publication activities. It's indeed an honor to have Dr. Nurul Islam, who I'd like to welcome to this session. We have, secondly, in our session, we have Harry Varway, who's the ambassador of the Netherlands to Bangladesh. He has been the ambassador to Bangladesh since August 2018 and has represented the Netherlands in a large number of bilateral and multilateral fora, in particular in the context of the European Union and the UN. He was appointed as the Director of Security, Integrity, and Crisis Management, the Netherlands Ambassador to Burundi. It's indeed a pleasure and an honor to have Harry Varway with us today as well. Thirdly, we have with us Dr. Judith Herbertson, who's the Development Director of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, Fcd of Bangladesh. She's worked in policy and corporate roles in the UK, including on FCDO's resource allocation model, collaborations with multilateral organizations, and UK support to Somalia. She has also led the department responsible for developing policy and programming with partners to increase focus on open societies, transparency, and accountability. I'd request everyone to mute your speakers if you're not speaking at the moment. Yes, thank you. Moving ahead, I'd like to introduce our last panelist, Dr. Atiq Rahman, who's the Executive Director of the Bangladesh Center for Advanced Studies and a very familiar face in the climate circles of our country, as he's a prominent environmentalist, scientist, and development expert. He was honored as the Champion of the Earth by the United Nations in 2008 for his outstanding leadership and contribution globally, regionally, nationally, and locally to the protection and sustainable management of the Earth's environment and natural resources. In addition to that, he's a standing lead author and convening lead author of the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, the convener of Climate Action Network South Asia, CANSA, and also the coordinator of the Global Forum of Environment and Poverty. So it's indeed a pleasure to have all of these esteemed speakers with us today in today's session. So now, without further ado, we'd like to move on to the presentation of the survey that was conducted nationally and share the findings with you. I'd like to welcome Dr. Nazim to take over the floor.
Thank you very much. Dear moderator, distinguished panelists, and the very large audience, and good evening from Bangladesh, everyone. Actually, we are going to present the current level of awareness and understanding of the youth in Bangladesh about climate change. Youth and climate change, the present context. So we have conducted a study on this subject by Center for Urban Studies, Dhaka, and Bangladesh Youth Leadership Center in Dhaka. So this is a joint study. We are going to present the findings of the study. First of all, I will set the context of climate change in Bangladesh, and then Tayeba will present the study findings. The climate change vulnerabilities in Bangladesh. You all know that Bangladesh is the most vulnerable countries in the world because of the location and the climatic condition in the country. You see, the Bangladesh, the climate of Bangladesh is set by the location of the Himalayas and the Bay of Bengal on the south and Himalayan on the north. And this is a tropical country, and the most, the situation is the low-lying country. And because of these locational characteristics and other problems like population density and inadequate infrastructure and resources, Bangladesh is the most vulnerable countries in the world. Next slide, please. Okay. What are the vulnerabilities Bangladesh is facing now? Bangladesh is facing almost all kind of climate vulnerabilities. So like cyclone, tornadoes, storm surges, even sea level rise, drought, and riverbank erosion, even urban floods and floods. So the map shows the pattern of these vulnerabilities, you know, by their location. So sea level, if sea level rises 1 meter, the huge part of the country will be submerged, and the floods frequency are increasing. Droughts is another phenomenon, although the last few years drought has not affected much. So these are the vulnerabilities in the country because of the climate change situation. The next slide, please. The impact of climate change. We are observing the erratic behavior of the climate in the country. the hottest summer, irregular monsoon, and the rainfall pattern and the crop failure and various kinds of agricultural damages. So these are uh, regular phenomenon in the phenomena in the country. So, but gradually increasing. So this situation displaces lots of people from rural areas and they move to the cities. We have studied one city, Dhaka, that we have found among all migrants in the city, the 21% of all migrants are because of climate change situation, climate change vulnerabilities. Because of the climate change vulnerabilities, 1/5 of the people move to the cities. So the cities are not prepared to accommodate them. That is another story. So next slide, please. Government has taken some initiatives, but we have found some gaps. So the initiatives are various policies are there and various reports are there, studies are there. So there are several policy level documents we have. So the energy policies and the sustainable renewable energy development authority. So these are and the other policies, Bangladesh climate change strategy and action plan, and then Bangladesh National Adaptation Program of Action, NAPA, Bangladesh Climate Change Trust, and then Climate Change and Gender Action Plan. So draft national urban sector policies. So this sort of, there are lots of policies are there, but we have observed, we have reviewed all these policies, but we have found the policies have little or almost no relevance of the youth in the country with these policies. So youths are remaining isolated. So youths are not involved in the process of activities and the development. So we think youth population of the country, which is almost one third of the total population, but they should be involved because they are energetic, they are innovative, they are future leaders of the country. If they know, if they are involved in these activities, maybe the country will get benefit from this. Next slide, please. Why youth? I have already were saying that the youths are very important part of the total population. So the UNICEF study shows that about 19 million children in the countries are very vulnerable in the country because of the climate change. So climate change and rural youth development. So because of the climate change factors, climate change problems, lots of people in the rural areas lost their jobs and employment, and they are just moving to the cities. So these are the situation in the countries. But the youth, if they are aware of the situation, if they can take initiative, they can be very helpful to adopt in the adaptation process, in the mitigation process of the vulnerabilities and the climate change factors. So with this, we have set the context of the study and study findings on the level of awareness and understanding and their initiatives perception will be explained by Tayeba. So I am requesting Tayeba to take over the presentation. Thank you from me.
So Dr. Nazim perfectly illustrated the story of Bangladesh's vulnerability to climate change and why is this a youth issue. Now, that is the preface of the story. The story is incomplete if we do not know what the young people of Bangladesh think about climate change.
Yeah.
From this thought, through an online survey across 8 divisions of Bangladesh, we surveyed 2,000 young people to learn 3 things. First, their knowledge and perception of climate change. Second, what initiative they are taking in this regard. And third, how we can support them. As you can see here, youth from all socioeconomic clusters and from all divisions of the country participated in this survey. And this gives us a good reflection of what young people in Bangladesh think about climate change. So the first question is, do our youth know about climate change? As we can clearly see here that 97% of the youth we surveyed said that they know about climate change, which is indeed very hopeful. We saw that our youth know about climate change, but then we asked, do they put sufficient emphasis on this urgent global crisis? And we found that for 96%, climate change is an important issue. Very hopeful statistics indeed. To know more about our young people's knowledge and their level of understanding of climate change, we asked if they know about the causes and effects of climate change. What we found is that they know about all the popular causes and effects. They know that deforestation and industrial pollution are affecting the climate. They know that due to climate change, Earth's temperature is increasing and sea levels are rising. They know that all of these are in turn affecting biodiversity, human health, and agricultural production. To this point, we were amazed by our young people's knowledge on climate change. To test them further, we asked if they can identify the commonly available climate change myths. To our surprise, the statistics were relieving. Our young people know that climate change is a real thing. They know that the Earth is getting warmer. They know that the number of polar bears is decreasing. So here the main question is this knowledge sufficient enough to save this planet? So let's find the answer then. We found it alarming that 50% of the surveyed youth think that climate change is a future problem. 19% of them think that animals will adapt to this crisis. But in reality, we all know that climate change is not a future problem. We need to act now. Animals will not adapt to this crisis. We are losing them and we will keep on losing them if we don't act. The government of Bangladesh has taken some notable initiatives in the form of policies and strategies to mitigate climate crisis. However, we found that 72% of the survey respondents have no idea about such initiatives. So it is very evident that we need more youth-friendly awareness campaigns. After knowing about their knowledge and awareness level, we wanted to know what initiatives our young people are taking to combat this crisis. As we can all see here, only 31% of youth said that they are taking initiatives to save this planet. What we found more alarming is that in a study by UNICEF, which was conducted earlier this year, it was found that 71% of our youth believe that the government will take action to address climate change. Yes, 71%, and that's a big number. In many of the cases, we see that whenever there's a problem, we tend to look up to authority. We can see the same thing happening here. Our youth have knowledge to act, but need leadership skills to take action without relying on authority. However, it is indeed hopeful that 60% of the surveyed youth want to take action to save this planet, and it is our duty to support them. When talking about youth initiatives in battling climate crisis, we wanted to know what initiative youth think they can take. It's very surprising that youth mentioned initiatives such as participating in awareness campaigns and making the people around them aware. But none of them say that we can go greener by walking or using a bicycle. And very few of them say that we can adopt a vegan diet. So there's a clear need for some adaptive changes. Finally, we wanted to sketch what systemic and policy level support youth need to fight against this crisis. As we have seen earlier, in Bangladesh, youth generally learn the basics of climate change from school and textbooks. So the knowledge source is there. We just need a better approach to teach those so that children can retain the knowledge and take action. We need carefully designed awareness campaigns for youth, both with and without digital infrastructure. Our youth need to be made a part of the decision-making process. They need to be supported with climate financing to take green initiatives. Drawing on the findings of this study, we see that our youth know about climate change. They want to get involved and take action. They just need to act fast as we have no time to waste. Collective leadership from today's youth is what we need to save this planet. Thank you, everyone. That's the study brief from our end. If you have any questions regarding this study methodology or finding, please write to us at the given email address. I would now request Sohara to take over.
Thank you so much for the very informative presentation and very concisely sharing the main findings of this study, which is so critical in capturing the views of youth from all around the country. And it was a very representatively done study, as has been referred to in one of the questions in the chat. And building on that, I would like to encourage all our audience members to share any questions you may have for our panelist members or the presentation with us, and we'll try to address as many of them towards the end of this session as possible. But of course, we are constrained for time. And we do want to hear from our esteemed speakers who have made time to be with us today. So just based on the findings of the presentation that have been shared with us, I'd like to request our speakers to share their very brief reflections in a couple of minutes, perhaps, so that after that we can go into a more open discussion with our audience and a moderated Q&A session. So first of all, it's my absolute honor to call upon Honorable Harry Varway, who's the Ambassador of Netherlands to Bangladesh, to share his remarks and insights on the presentation that has been shared with us. Over to you, Harry.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be among you. I would like to express my thanks to Dr. Nurul and Ishrat for their presentation. So many of the things are new to me, so I will not be able to reflect on them immediately. Let me also thank Ejaz for his leadership, and we genuinely love his energy, and I think his power, his energy has brought this about. So we're very happy that this is happening. So allow me to give me a few brief remarks as regards the general outlook of emphasizing youth and climate change and linking them together, as both Dr. Nurul and Ishrat have done. So first of all, I would like to focus a bit on the recent past. The world is still working hard to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's been a challenging year for many of us. Some have lost loved ones, and others are still recovering from the effects of an infection with COVID-19, and societies are still in lockdown in many places. However, I choose to be an optimist. And one of the lessons I take from the global pandemic is this: by working together on a global scale, we can overcome almost anything. The resilience will be needed because the next big challenge humanity faces has already been building up for a long time. Whatever we do, the effects will be felt for generations. And I'm talking, of course, of climate change. One thing COVID-19 and climate change have in common is that individual behavior can feel like it does not matter so much. If I choose not to wear a mask, then maybe I get lucky. Maybe I will not get sick or infect others. But don't be fooled by this. If everyone refuses to wear a mask, the risk increases exponentially for all of us, including the ones who do wear masks. Similarly, it might feel like recycling waste or eating less meat doesn't really matter. After all, you're only an individual. But never forget, if everyone would think like that, we wouldn't be able to tackle global challenges at all. Of course, the major difference is that the effects of climate change have taken much longer to become widely accepted. In November 1989, I tell you, representatives from around the world gathered in a Dutch town called Noordwijk aan Zee. the aim was to reach a legally binding agreement to limit the emissions of greenhouse gases. If there was ever a moment when global warming could have been slowed down, it was then. Scientists had already concluded that carbon emissions were causing temperatures to rise, and most countries saw this trend as a non-political issue that needed to be addressed. But it wasn't. Negotiations collapsed completely. The sad result of this failure is that since then, more CO2 has been emitted than in all human history before that moment. So we're talking about 1989. The urgency to act has never been greater. If we do not act now, we leave behind a polluted and sick planet for our children and grandchildren, and the children and grandchildren of those who are poor today will be hit hardest. I believe that the pandemic has provided us with an opportunity to stimulate the change that is required for a climate resilient world, an opportunity to increase prosperity and public health. Together, we can build back better. What gives me hope is that the economic view on climate action is shifting. Increasingly, we regard economic practices that conflict with sustainable development as market failures. Investing in clean energy, clean transport, and clean industries is the best way to create well-paid local jobs that boost economic growth today. And it's increasingly clear that green solutions simply deliver a better return on investment. Renewables have proven immune to coronavirus. Wind and solar power output have doubled every 5 years. Year on year, renewables have done better than projected. And the International Energy Agency now believes solar energy will be the cheapest source of energy in all human history. So over to the front lines of the battle against climate change. The Netherlands and Bangladesh are both Delta countries. Together, we are at the forefront of the battle against the consequences of climate change. Rising sea levels, heavier rains, cyclones, but also drought, salinity, are just examples of the issues we see increasing all over the world. In the Netherlands, the past years, we have experienced summer droughts and citizens have asked to use less water. But developing countries are often hit hardest by these phenomena. In Bangladesh, I've had the sad privilege of seeing the challenges of climate change happening and materialize in real time. But Bangladesh would not be Bangladesh if it weren't for its remarkable resilience. Bangladesh, the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, Bangladesh has a local office of the Global Commission on Adaptation, and Bangladesh has adopted the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100. Bangladesh is showing inspiring leadership on the climate adaptation agenda. And I see that the mitigation agenda is also picking up. Bangladesh seems to be moving away from building newly planned coal plants. Not only are coal plants highly polluting, but it is also this. Investing in non-renewables today is simply no longer a good business model. Green investment help Bangladesh move closer to meeting international climate environment goals and will make the economy more resilient to future shocks. The Netherlands looks forward to building on our mutual efforts in the implementation of the Bangladesh Delta Plan, and the Delta Plan shows that water gives opportunity to invest, to learn, and to grow, provide economic and social opportunities. Adaptive management of water and land resources is vital for Bangladesh to secure sufficient food supplies, livelihoods, and maintain ecological balance. Effective polder and char development demonstrate that despite salinization and in the coastal zone, farmers are able to yield 2, sometimes 3 harvests per year, contributing to the food security of this nation. With food security guaranteed, farmers may diversify crops and look for additional distinctive businesses and export opportunities, opening up the doors for foreign investors, businesses and trade, also with the Netherlands. And this Delta Plan is a heritage. And here's the link with the future and the youth. A heritage, a gift from the present generation to the future generation. The plan does not distinguish between genders or ages because it's an inclusive plan for the entire population. What is most needed now is that the future generations of Bangladesh embrace it and make it their own. It is a long-term 100-year adaptive plan. This means it needs revision in a few years from now and again a couple of years later. So if youth becomes engaged now, they will be able to guide its implementation over the coming decades, ensuring a livable country for all citizens of Bangladesh. To do so, I would call for young entrepreneurs to become actively involved, and I think the sector is ready for new startups to become active. Creative hubs of young people that may not have a long history, but are able to think outside the box to bring new approaches and new techniques to the Delta Plan and make it truly a successful plan for Bangladesh. So I'm challenging you, get out of there, and I hope to see you soon to become active in the sector. Let's get to work together. Let's send a positive force throughout Bangladesh and beyond, and we owe it to the next generations. So these are my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your wonderfully concise remarks and very thoughtful. And I think there was a lot there to be taken away for our youth who are in the audience today. It's my honor now to call upon our next esteemed panelist, Judith Herbertson from the Fcd of Bangladesh. Judith, the floor is all yours for your remarks.
Thank you very much indeed. Good evening to all our distinguished panelists and to all of the young people in the audience. I won't repeat what Harry said. I think maybe we've been to the same speechwriters. We all now know that we're facing an urgent planetary emergency. Climate change is here, it's real, and it's the lived experience of many in Bangladesh as elsewhere. And largely this is our fault. We, the older generation, and those that preceded us. And we owe you, the young generation, an apology. There have been plenty of people in governments who have known the headlines for some years and some of the science and the facts, but none of us has acted quickly enough. We thought it would go away, or we thought the science wasn't as compelling as actually we should have read it. And this is now going to be your problem that we pass on to you and that of your children and grandchildren. So for you, it's personal. It's very encouraging to hear that 85% of young people here are learning about climate change in school and that 70% are worried. But my heart sinks. 70% of young people shouldn't be worrying about something that we have created for you. Equally, only 50% think this is a future problem. And you now need to be the future leaders on climate action. And to do that, you'll need to build your climate science knowledge and your leadership skills and your communication skills and your passion and commitment and energy. Young people have that in industrial quantities. To make your voices heard, to drive political action and to limit the worst of those consequences, to start raising awareness and changing behaviours, promoting sustainable lifestyles, conserving nature, supporting renewables, and adopting environmentally friendly practices within your homes and communities. Governments, both national and local, and indeed global bodies, need to listen to you and engage you in decision-making, particularly on environmental related issues. Protecting the environment, biodiversity, nature, it's all part of the solution. And you mustn't take no. You mustn't let governments be slow and be inert and not take action and write plans and not do anything about them. You need to keep banging on the door until people react. The UK is holding the COP presidency this year and into next year, and meaningful youth participation is one of the top priorities. We have a designated youth engagement team working with youth groups already all over the world, and we will ensure these groups' views are reflected at the COP26 meeting in November, we hope in Glasgow. And we've established a Civil Society and Youth Advisory Council, where young activists, NGOs, Indigenous peoples from around the world can contribute. And together with our Italian co-presidents, we're organising the Youth for Climate Driving Ambition meeting in Milan in September, again offering young people globally the chance to develop tangible proposals for the discussions at COP. Further information on all of these opportunities is available on the UK COP26 website, so please get involved. The good thing is that millions of you young people are now standing up and speaking out more and more loudly about the climate crisis and participating actively. This Global Youth Climate Summit has created the momentum, or built on the momentum, I should say, and we must keep this going. Not just on the road to COP26, but well into the coming decades, I'm afraid, to restore a greener, healthier planet and support development for all of us living on the planet, humans, whilst protecting nature, the animals, those we share this planet with. The journey ahead is going to be long, longer, I'm afraid, than any of our lives, and the path is going to be steep. But I'm an eternal optimist in the power of young people, in you, to influence those around you and not be afraid to demand change. Change is already happening. It's all around us, in governments, across societies, in the private sector, in the rich philanthropists, in the media, and we need to work with that. And we will stand shoulder to shoulder. We've created this problem, but we're not running away from it now. So thank you and good luck.
So much wisdom packed into a few minutes. Thank you so much, Judith, for those remarks. It's indeed an honor that the UK is hosting the next COP, and we have you with us to share your insights. So next, I would love to move on to Atiq sir from BCAS to share his reflections on the presentation.
Thank you very much. Congratulations to the youth to taking this initiative, because we as a generation have succeeded in identifying the problem, some of its causes, and some solutions, but not good enough solutions to give easy or acceptable and clearly understandable action, which has to be done immediately, largely, globally, and by everyone. That we have not been able to do well. Governments are coming up and a lot of actions have taken place. The science is very bold. Intergovernment Panel of Climate Change, and I have the privilege of being one of its founders and members from the first to fifth assessment, which is like 25 covering over 30 years, starting very early, mid of the 80s. And in the fourth assessment, as you know, received the Nobel Peace Prize, and we were great and honored to be participants in that part of the Nobel Peace Prize, as two of us from Bangladesh got the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the IPCC. Now, all that given, the knowledge has improved tremendously. There has been thrust, and when I started climate change action, I was a youth. Depending on definition, I was 30, 31 at that time. And when we started the climate convention, which is probably one of the best conventions we have, and we have been the most critical analysts of that convention because it did not address some of the central issues of our survival, which was poverty, which was subsistence and biodiversity. But for that, we had another convention on the biodiversity. And during that whole debate, the leadership of that time, we were the youth, hammering, saying that these have been not got enough. And they have diversified, and they said, we can't do it. Let's address climate change, which is emerging so fast with such great impact and rapidly increasing impacts. And that I'll mention in half a minute later. What happened that time was that the global leadership said, give us 30 years when we will address poverty, the worst form. And that was the MDG, Millennium Development Goal, of reducing the worst form of poverty. And then for another 15 years, we will look at all forms of poverty, which is now the Sustainable Development Goal, whose 1, 2, 3 SDGs are basically poverty and hunger oriented, adequate water, SDG 6, safe drinking water, etc., and the survival of biodiversity. SDG 13 is the climate change protection and action. So the global leadership has moved. The question is, have we involved the youth to whom we are leaving the biggest of the problem? Now, climate change is the biggest threat mankind has ever faced. Much bigger than poverty, much bigger than economic growth, much bigger than any of the other problems that we know. Not only that, it is also creates the highest amount of insecurity in terms of human beings, not the war type insecurity, but the human insecurity. And between, just to give the Bangladesh example, between 1999 to 2019, which is the 20 years, there has been 191 extreme events or disasters in Bangladesh. 191. Out of them, 90% is about 180 of them or 170 of them are due to hydrodynamic actions and causes linked to climate change. So natural disasters have an imprint of climate change. Climate change overtakes many of these natural disasters and gives it a shade. And it is the disaster that hurts the people and the ecosystem most. And it is the climate change impact and mitigated or implemented through the extreme disasters and extreme events. Now let's get one science correct, which is often not understood clearly. It is not the average value of something, it's not the average temperature, it's the extremes that matters. Because that's what affects the human society, that's what affects the extreme events across the world. When there is a 1 degree rise in the tropical, in the equatorial area, which is like 1.5 degrees, the tropic where we are present, where Bangladesh is, then with the equivalent amount, there is a 6 degree increase in the Arctic area. So the same amount of greenhouse gas has differential impact in differential ways. When a cyclone hits Bangladesh in the southern area, it hits areas where the poor are hardest hit, and among the poor is the women and the children. So it's the differential impact that affects the society. So those children, for a period of time, do not get enough food, causing their health not to be able to cope up, and stunting becomes one of the reasons for those repeated cyclones and repeated floods. This year, there has been 4 almost consecutive floods over the period during the COVID period. And these 4 floods were caused with high rainfall in the Indian states of Arunachal, Meghalaya, Assam, and all that area of the northeast, in Nepal, in Bhutan, and in China. All that water comes through Bangladesh, and Bangladesh was flooded as one after another started coming. And some of the water that came through Brahmaputra went around in the Ganges, again joined down there, and we had repeated floods. So 4 floods, and as the 4th flood was about to recede, there has been a depression in the coastal area, which has caused the water flow to be retarded. Sky could not pass, so it was 4.5 floods over that period that had a great impact on Bangladesh's food security. And right now, as you know, if you look at the headline of yesterday's newspapers, Bangladesh has to buy over 70 million tons of rice, which Bangladesh was self-sufficient in rice, or more or less self-sufficient in rice. The same thing happened in 2017, where there were multiple floods in Haur area, the depressed basin in the Sylhet Netrokona area, for which again we had to import rice, and the global supply wasn't there. Finally, after getting from China and Vietnam and Laos, we had to get from Myanmar, more or less the similar sort of time as Myanmar was pushing their people into Bangladesh. So politically, it becomes extremely sensitive. Now, the critical issue is, how have we involved the youth? Sadly, we have been tried to inform through literature, through entering the textbooks. That's not good enough. We have not mobilized the youth. We meaning our generation, the government. Youth have mobilized themselves up to a point. But that has to be done in a much bigger way, so that they were aware of many of the actions that they can take. What has been said, yes, the awareness is there. they know about climate change. That is the success of the previous generation hammering it on. And luckily, Bangladesh had some early scientists who have been hammering not only in Bangladesh, but in the global system. The word adaptation was designed in Bangladesh. I'll stop in a minute, half a minute. Adaptation was involved here, and in the convention, we managed to put it in. Now, the 4 areas where we have to discuss further and confine. One is mitigation, which is the reduction of the greenhouse gas. Bangladesh is not in that position. We don't need to reduce at this point in time. What we have to do is a global responsible citizen, and that is under the national determined contribution. National determined contribution is the project of Bangladesh government. I happen to be the team leader of that project. So something is happening around there. But adaptation, National Adaptation Plan, is happening. So one is the whole question of adaptation, mitigation, then is capacity building. That's where the youth have to be involved in a big way to build the national capacity, to take it further and reduce the impact first, and at the same time, enhance and integrate climate change in all development forums, and particularly economic development forum. That is happening, but has to happen much bigger way. We'll talk about it later. Fourth is funding and financing. Bangladesh has been funding mostly from its own resources, some partners' resources, but nowhere near the commitment that was given by the rich countries. They have kept anywhere near that. Right now, US is coming on board. Hopefully, there will be some shift, but we don't see any great signal for that yet. Bangladesh needs about $7 billion right now to address climate change impacts and bring Bangladesh to a baseline to reduce only the impacts of climate change, not enhance and take development further. So that's what we need as well, rapidly. Let me stop there, and I hope we'll come back for other things later.
Thank you so much, Adik sir, for your remarks. And thank you everyone who's been sharing your questions in the chat box. We really appreciate them. Unfortunately, since we have only about 5 minutes left, we probably won't be able to take all of them, but I will try to cluster them together and present them to our panelists. So the first one I would like to ask to Harry, which is basically about something you referred to in your speech about youth entrepreneurship. And also you mentioned, you alluded to the Delta Plan as well and the work you've been doing in that end. So my question to you, and I think this is a summary of a lot of questions that have come up in the chat box, is we understand youth entrepreneurship is a way to respond to the SDGs call for economic transportation and decoupling the economy from environmental degradation. For instance, through working on access to affordable and sustainable green energy for all. But how can we really empower youth with the tools they need to become green entrepreneurs? And how can we empower them with the capacity they need to contribute to something like the implementation of the Delta Plan in Bangladesh?
So this is a very, very wide and question that I cannot answer in just a few minutes. But let me just say from my end, I've been involved over the past 2.5 years with Bangladeshi young entrepreneurs, startup incubators where people work on very small steps to really make a difference, like composting or just plant trees on your balconies, things like this. But the entrepreneurship that Bangladeshi youth has shown is really amazing. And there is a lot of creativity and a lot of energy in that world. And what is needed in this economic space of Bangladesh is accommodating and make it possible for those young entrepreneurs to really, move forward. And that encompasses many, many issues, including the availability of loans, including the whole legal aspect that surrounds entrepreneurship in this country. So there's much to be done, but my major message is, Bangladesh, please accommodate youth to be entrepreneurs and to really live its creativity. So I will leave it as this because of time, but I think we can speak hours on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks. And indeed, I think all of you have really touched upon many of the questions that have come up in the chat box during your presentation. So although we don't have time for Q&A, we really thank you for your time that you've given us today. And we really appreciate the insights you have shared with all the youth who have joined us from all over the world in today's session.